Hi guys, and welcome back. In today's video, we'll be doing a summary of the second topic in paper 3, which is forests under threat. I posted the first topic of paper 3 yesterday, so be sure to watch it if you have not done so already. It will be linked in the description and is on the paper 3 playlist on the channel page. I'm also currently finishing off the video for the last topic of paper 3 and will upload it shortly. If you are not subscribed, make sure that you do so that you're notified when I post it. Okay, let's get started.
Okay, so what are the tropical rainforests like? Now, the first thing we'll talk about is where we find them, and they are found near the equator. Now, the equator is a low pressure area with a lot of insolation and rainfall all year round. And this is a very good environment for photosynthesis to take place and also for a huge biodiversity to thrive. Now, biodiversity refers to the number of plant and animal species in an area. And like we said in the last video, plants are referred to as flora and animals are referred to as fauna. Now, the Amazon rainforest is home to 10% of the world's plant and animal species. Okay, so the next thing that we are looking at here is the structure of the rainforest. So the rainforest is made up of several layers. And the first layer here that we are going to be looking at is the emergent layer. That is the topmost layer here. And this here is above the main canopy being the layer after that. So most of the trees grow up to the height of the canopy layer, but the emergents are extra tall trees. They are really tall. They grow up to 60 meters high, and they are above that main canopy. Now, the reason they grow to that height is because there is a lot of competition for the sunlight in the rainforest due to the biodiversity that we mentioned earlier. And therefore, they are growing to that height to be able to reach the sunlight. So this layer here is home to monkeys and birds. They tend to live in this particular emergent layer here. Then the second layer is the main one, and that is the canopy layer. And the trees here are around 20 to 40 meters high. And they provide a continuous thick layer, providing obviously a sheltered environment for the biodiversity that is below them. Now, there's a lot of food here, and it's home to snakes, birds, lianas, and primates. Then we have the next layer here, which is the understory layer. Now, this particular layer here receives very little sunlight, obviously due to the main canopy the canopy layer that is above it. Now, it has mostly young trees, and those young trees have very large leaves, and those large leaves are an adaptation for them to be able to capture any sunlight that they can, so that they can be able to carry on with that process of photosynthesis and make their carbohydrates of their food. Then lastly, we have the forest floor right at the bottom. Now, this here is a dark and damp layer with thin fertile soils due to decomposition. So why are we saying that the soils are fertile? We are saying that the soils are fertile because they are getting a lot of decomposed material. So the material that is decomposing is basically the leaves of the plants that are in the rainforest and the animals that die and fall to the forest floor. So those decompose very quickly. And the reason they decompose really quickly is because that warm or moist and damp environment, which obviously has some water, is a really good environment for that decomposition to take place. So there's a lot of decomposition that is then adding nutrients into the soil, and those nutrients are then very quickly being taken up by the trees because of that huge biodiversity that we talked about as they grow. Okay, so we have also a couple of animal and additional plant adaptations that I'd like us to go through. And in terms of animal adaptations, and these are likely to be short questions in the examination, about how either animals or plants have adapted to living in the rainforest. So the first animal adaptation here that we are looking at is for the sloths. So the slots have large claws and tendons to help hang upside down for hours in the rainforest. So the slots tend to live on the obviously they live in the tree, on the trees, and they only come down to the forest floor only once a week. So they are basically on the tree throughout their life, so to speak. Then we have the primates. Now the primates, their adaptation is that they have very long tails, and these tails help them to balance in the canopy layer. And they also have very strong claws for grip, to be able to grip on the trees as they obviously move from one tree to the other, because we know they like to hang on the trees and to jump from one tree to the other. Then we have birds here as well, which and their adaptation is that they have loud calls so that they can hear each other in the very thick vegetation and especially in the canopy layer. Then we have the big cats as well. So tigers, leopards, and jaguars have camouflaged fur so that their prey cannot see them when they are approaching. Now, as far as the the plant adaptations are concerned, we have the epiphytes. So the epiphytes have roots that dangle mid-air, and they do this so that they can get water and air in the main canopy. Then we have lianas, and lianas are climbing plants. So these ones climb to the canopy layer from the floor to reach the sunlight in that particular layer. Then we also have drip tips as an adaptation. So these are leaves, and they are thick, waxy, pointed leaves to shed rainwater off them, so that the water does not remain on them and cause them to rot. The drip tips will help them to shed or get rid of that water pretty quickly. Then we have buttress roots. Now these are the most popular, not the most popular, but the most common, and these are the roots of the emergent trees. So we said that the emergent trees are the ones that are really, really tall. They grow up to 60 meters, and they need these massive buttress roots, sometimes that are above the surface. Well, they are not necessarily just below the ground, but above the ground as well. They need these roots for support, and also to be able to pick up the nutrients from the surface of the soil. Okay. In this next slide, we will look at the nutrient cycle and the food web in the tropical rainforests. So the nutrient cycle. The nutrients are cycled very fast in the rainforest due to the huge biodiversity. Now, the biomass is large in the rainforest due to the large variety of flora and fauna. Now, that biomass, as you can see here, in this nutrient cycle is actually quite large. And if you look at the key here, the circles here represent the stores, and the size of the circle is proportional to the amount of nutrients that are stored. So you can see that the size of the biomass is quite large, and therefore the nutrients being stored here are quite a lot. Then we also have the arrows, and the arrows, the green arrows, they show the transfers that are taking place. Now, the width of the arrow is proportional to the amount of nutrients that is transferred, or that are transferred. So the larger the arrow, the more the nutrients are being transferred. So yes, so we going back to the biomass. The biomass is really, really large, and that's due to the biodiversity that there is in the tropical rainforest. And the trees especially store huge quantities of nutrients. Then we have the litter. Now, the litter here refers to the falling leaves and the animals that die and fall to the forest floor. And we can see that this here is a lot smaller. The litter is a lot smaller than the biomass. And that's because the litter is decomposed very rapidly by the detritivores due to the hot and damp conditions that we talked about earlier on. And when that happens, when they are broken down, those nutrients are then transferred into the soil. Now, once those nutrients are transferred into the soil, and you can see that the soil here is a larger store than the litter because it's receiving a lot of nutrients very quickly due to that rapid decomposition by the detritivores. So the soil then receives those nutrients, and those nutrients will then be taken up into the biomass again to facilitate the growth of that biomass, because we know that the plants require those nutrients from the soil. So the soil is receiving nutrients from the litter, but not just the litter. The soil is also receiving nutrients from chemical weathering that is taking place. Now, chemical weathering obviously is referring to the breakdown of rocks. Now, when those rocks break down due to chemical weathering, they also will add nutrients to the soil, and those nutrients again will be taken up by the biomass to help it to grow. So let's go back here and have a look here. So the soil is quickly depleted of the nutrients or the fertility of it by the huge growth transfer, as the number of trees take up the nutrients to continue to grow and propagate the large biomass. Now, some of the nutrients, however, in the soil are going to be lost through leaching. And leaching is when you have huge amounts of rainfall in the rainforest, and because of that water, that excess water that is falling onto the rainforest floor, some of the nutrients in the soil are washed away by that rainwater. That is a process of leaching, and that can lead to the soils becoming infertile. Okay, so that there is a nutrient cycle, and this is a really important one to remember, because you might be required to remember the size of the stores and the transfers, and then also be able to compare this particular nutrient cycle to the one for the Taiga biome. Okay, so this is for the tropical rainforests. And there's also one for the Taiga biome, which we shall look at later, which is slightly different. Okay, so moving on to the food web in the tropical rainforests. Now we know that the sun is the main source of energy. Okay, so the sun here will provide the energy for photosynthesis, and the plants, which are the primary producers, are then going to use that sun's energy to make their carbohydrates. So we have orchids, we have seeds here, we have banana trees, we have bamboo trees, we have coconut trees, and so on. So that those are the primary producers. Then they will be consumed by the animals, the primary consumers. So this is the food web, obviously, now. And you have, the primary consumers consuming the plants. Okay. Then those primary consumers, in turn, will be consumed by the secondary consumers, right? Then above that, we have the tertiary consumers, which are sort of at the top of the food chain. So you have jaguars here, you have pythons, and so on. So they will then consume the smaller animals here. So you can see that there is a transfer of the sun's energy. That energy will be transferred into the plants. Then those plants will be eaten by the primary consumers. The energy will be transferred into the primary consumers, and then into the secondary consumers, and finally the tertiary consumers. And then when all these eventually die, so the plants and the animals, they end up being decomposed by the detritivores and the decomposers, and they end up again in the soil. And then that soil again now gets more nutrients. Those nutrients are then used to support this large biomass that is in the tropical rainforest. So what is a taiga or boreal forest like? Now, before we begin, I'd like to mention that the taiga biome is also referred to as the boreal biome or boreal forest, and is also referred to as the coniferous forest. So those three are interchangeable. It's either called the taiga, boreal, or coniferous forests. Okay, so where are they found? They are found between 50 to 70 degrees latitude. So they are sort of in the mid latitudes, mid to upper latitudes, and they are mostly in the northern hemisphere. So places like Canada, and the boreal forest is the world's largest biome. What is the climate like then? So the climate is seasonal. There are short, wet summers and long, cold, dry winters. And during the winter, the snow will remain on the ground for many months. So because we have short, wet summers, it means that the growing season also is very short, because we know that the trees require that sunlight and require the water to be able to grow. And because of that short wet summer, then that growing season is very short, and the animals and plants in these particular areas have adapted to those kinds of conditions. So what are the plant adaptations? So the first one is that the trees are cone shaped. So the kind of vegetation that you get here, as you can see from this photo here, the trees are cone shaped. So the shape of the trees that we would use as Christmas trees. And the reason for that cone shape is so that the snow can slide off the branches easily without snapping those branches. So that is the reason for the cone shape. Then the branches are also flexible. That's a second adaptation. So they bend downwards in the winter to get rid of snow and avoid breaking. Then the third adaptation is that they have waxy, needle-like leaves. So the wax coating helps protect them from snow and reduces water loss during the long, dry winters. Then in terms of the roots are shallow and quite wide. And this is to avoid the permafrost, so that they can continue to have the ability to support the tree. Now, permafrost basically refers to the condition where the ground is permanently frozen. And because of that, the trees cannot go very deep into the ground, because they would be going into the permafrost. So the roots are shallow. They are sort of nearer to the surface than much deeper into the ground. Then we have the biomass, we have the nutrient cycle here, like we had for the tropical rainforest. Now the biomass in the Taiga's nutrient cycle is a lot smaller, as you can see. And this is due to that shorter growing season. So the plants here don't get an opportunity to grow all year round like the ones in the tropical rainforest, because we said in the tropical rainforest that it's hot and wet all year round. But here the growing season is very short because of those short wet summers. Then we have the litter. Now the litter here is bigger, and the reason for that is the colder conditions. Now we said that for decomposition to take place, you need that sunlight, the warmth rather, and you need water. But because that is limited here in terms of the sunlight and the warmth, then that decomposition is not taking place as rapidly as it would in the rainforest. Then we have the soil here, and it's a really, really small store, as you can see here. And this again is due to the low precipitation and the slower chemical weathering as well that is taking place. We know that weathering takes place in warmer environments, or takes place a lot more rapidly in warmer environments. And because this is a much colder environment, the weathering is taking place a lot slower. So it's not adding, the soil is not getting as many nutrients from that weathering, because it's almost not present. And the little of it that takes place is during that short wet summer. And this all means that the NPP rates are low. So NPP refers to the net primary productivity. And the net primary productivity here is referring to the amounts of energy that the trees are taking in and what they are giving off in terms of transpiration and so on. So in the tropical rainforest, the net primary productivity is very high because we have a lot of input from the sun all year round. But here in the Taiga biome, that net primary productivity is low because there is a short growing season. Now, what about the animal adaptations then in the Taiga biome? So due to those long winters, long and dry winters, the animals will have to hibernate. So the bears can actually hibernate for 3 to 7 months without eating or drinking. That's quite a long time. And then there's also migration here as an adaptation. So many birds will move away from the taiga during the winter and then return in the summer. And then the third adaptation, animal adaptation, is that the animals here tend to have thick, oily fur. And that means that the snow and water will slide off the animals so that they can maintain their body temperature. Going back to the tropical rainforests, what are the direct and indirect threats to the tropical rainforests? Now, direct threats are deliberate actions that harm the rainforests, while indirect threats are unintended actions that bring harm to the rainforests. So we'll start off with the direct threats, so the deliberate actions that harm the rainforest. And one of them is farming. Now we know that the global population is growing rapidly, which then means that the demand for food is on the increase or is quite high as it is at the moment. Now that means that large-scale agriculture to produce that food is required. And this has led to the clearing of the rainforest for ranching in order to keep those animals for beef, for example, to keep cattle for beef, and also the clearing of the rainforest for the growing of soybeans. Now, because this is being done on a large scale, it's greatly impacting on the rainforest. So it's a direct threat. Then the second direct threat here is logging. So this is the cutting down of trees for commercial purposes. And when we are talking about commercial purposes, it means that it's being done on a large scale. And it's mainly because it's done by TNCs or the transnational corporations. So these are really large companies that are driven by, they are profit driven, and therefore will cut huge tracts of the rainforest, of the rainforest to be able to access that wood. So they cut the large areas of the rainforest for the emergence, such as mahogany, which is a hardwood. So that is quite needed, or is in high demand, and therefore is being cut down from the rainforest. Then we have mining. So large areas of the rainforest must be cut down to access the natural resources such as fossil fuels and precious minerals that are in the rainforest. Okay. Then the last direct threat is because of energy and infrastructure development. Now, as a result of LICs, as a lot of LICs develop rather, there's an increasing demand for energy and transport infrastructure, and the forests are therefore being cleared for roads and for that energy in the form of hydroelectric power stations. Now those hydroelectric power stations normally take up very large areas of the rainforest, and obviously when you clear down the trees, that does not necessarily have a good impact on the rainforest. Now we did say that there's a great reliance by the biodiversity that is in the rainforest. So you remember we talked about the food chain, and in the food chain we said that you have the primary producers that are relying on the sun, then the primary consumers are relying on those primary producers, then there's the secondary consumers and the tertiary consumers, and all of these are relying on each other. And therefore, if we destroy one part of the rainforest, that will have a large or a far-reaching impact on the rest of that ecosystem. So moving on then to the indirect threats. What are they? The first one here is climate change. Now, human activity has led to the enhanced greenhouse effect, and this has led to global warming. Now, certain species of animals and plants will be unable to survive these higher temperatures. And this will obviously lead to a reduction in the biodiversity. And we also have the desertification and drought as a problem as well. Okay, so this climate change obviously is a threat to the biodiversity that is in the tropical rainforests. Then we have pollution. So we talked about a rapidly growing population. We talked about mining that is taking place in this rainforest. So all this, and logging. So all this is likely to cause water pollution. Now, the water pollution here will reduce the resilience of the trees that are in the rainforest, and that will make them more susceptible to disease, and that will lead to habitat loss. Then we also have air pollution, which then leads to acid rain, and the acid rain, the acid content in that rain will have a negative impact on the rainforest. Then the last thing here we'll talk about in terms of indirect threats are the invasive species. Now, this involves the introduction of non-native species, so species that have not always been in this particular area. And this sometimes can either be accidental or for increasing agricultural productivity. And when this happens, it will disturb the ecological balance that is in that particular ecosystem, which in this case here is a tropical rainforest, and will obviously harm and affect the biodiversity. So we have direct and indirect threats here, and we need to know this for the examination.
What are the direct and indirect threats to the taiga or boreal forests? So moving on to the taiga, we've just talked about the rainforest. There are several direct and indirect threats to the taiga or boreal forests. And the first one here is infrastructure development. So just like in the rainforest, the demand for energy and transport infrastructure leads to the taiga being cleared for roads and dams for hydroelectric power. And then the second direct threat here is logging. Now, the trees in the taiga are softwood trees. Now, these are in high demand for paper, furniture, and construction. And it's worth noting here that the taiga is found in the northern hemisphere, where there is high mass consumption and high levels of urbanization. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that most of the countries that are HIC are actually found along this particular belt here where the taiga is found, right? So we said that an example here is Canada, right? So a lot of developed countries or HICs are in this particular belt, and therefore the demand for this softwood is coming from those countries, and we know that those countries have rapidly urbanized and they are fairly wealthy, and therefore the demand for manufactured goods is quite high, and there's mass consumption in those countries. That means that logging then becomes a big problem and a big deal because the demand for this softwood is going to be extremely high. Then we have mining as a third direct threat to the taiga. And again, large areas of the taiga must be cut down to access the natural resources such as fossil fuels. Now, the use of heavy machinery also causes air and water pollution, and this impacts on the fragile environment. And a good example of this is the Athabasca tar sands in Canada. Okay, moving on to the indirect threats. Again here, an indirect threat is climate change. Now, specifically to the taiga biome, certain species of animals and plants will be unable to survive the higher temperatures, leading to a reduction in the biodiversity. And then global warming has also been associated with an increase in wildfires during the summer months, especially in the taiga biome. And that's because the coniferous trees here in the taiga biome are highly flammable. So they catch fire really, really quickly, and then they burn very, very fast. So wildfires also increases fire tolerant species that will then begin to dominate and reduce biodiversity within this taiga biome. Now, when you have a fire, obviously, the trees that then grow after that, after the fire, are likely to have adapted to those very, that harsh environment of having had a fire. And that's why we are referring to them as fire tolerant species. And because they are a lot hardier and they are a new introduction into the ecosystem, they are likely to reduce biodiversity in that system, because they may take up, they will obviously take up the space of other plants that are in that particular area. Then pests and diseases are also on the up due to the winters that are not as harsh as they used to be. Now, with climate change, obviously, the temperatures are going to be slightly higher, which means that the winters are not going to be as cold. And we know that very cold winters can actually get rid of pests and diseases. But then with the warmer temperatures, that destruction of pests and diseases is not likely to take place, and therefore they are likely to be a lot more in the taiga biome. Then we have pollution here again, and pollution here is water and air pollution, which is similar to the one that was taking place in the rainforest. And then we also have invasive species, which also again is similar. So that one we shall leave out because we've already covered. What is being done to protect tropical rainforests? Now, there are several large organizations that are dedicated to protecting tropical rainforests, including the World Wildlife Fund, so the WWF, the Rainforest Trust, Conservation International, the Nature Conservancy, which is a TNC, and the Rainforest Alliance. Now, the ones that are covered in our specification are the ones that I have summarized below here. And we have the name of the organization and what that organization does. Now, the first one is CITES, so CITES, and this has a global approach. Now, according to them, CITES is the international, it's a convention rather on international trade in endangered species of wild fauna and flora. And it's an international agreement between governments. Its aim is to ensure that international trade in specimens of wild animals and plants does not threaten the survival of the species. So that is what they say on their website. So what they are trying to do is to ensure that any endangered species of animals and plants are being protected, and they have formed an agreement between governments to ensure that that is being done. Now, they have had several successes as well as limitations, and one of their successes is that there has been a reduction in the trade of ivory in Africa. Now, ivory trade is where people trade elephant tusks. And obviously, when they are doing that, they are killing the elephants and endangering the elephant species. And this has been, the sites have been very successful in reducing the ivory trade, which is a really good thing. Then another success is that 185 countries are currently signed up to CITES, which is a really good thing, because more countries working together means that they can protect more endangered species. Then another success is that they have managed to protect very many species. So what are the limitations then? The limitations, one of them is global warming. Like we've said, global warming is actually affecting biodiversity across the world, and therefore that's a limitation, or an impediment, or hindrance rather, if you like, that they have faced. Then we have the second limitation here, and that is that a species must be under threat to meet or to make the list. That means that there are some species that are not under threat, that are actually being that cannot be protected by CITES. So that is problematic. And then the last limitation here is sites do not prevent deforestation. So deforestation will still take place whether sites are there or not, because some people will just continue to cut down the rainforest, okay, as much as sites are trying to prevent that from happening. Then the second organization here is RED, so REDD. So it's a UN project that stands for Reducing Emissions from Deforestation and Forest Degradation. So their purpose is to stop deforestation, and which is a major driver of climate change. Okay, so that basically means that when we cut down trees, we are exacerbating climate change, or we are, facilitating that process of climate change, and that is because the trees are taking carbon dioxide and give off oxygen. So with fewer trees, obviously, if we cut down the trees, we will have a lot more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and that will lead to climate change or global warming. Now, we did mention in the last video that the rainforest has been referred to as the lungs of the earth, and the reason why it has been referred to as such is because it's helping it's helping the earth to breathe, quote unquote, and that's because obviously it's taking in the carbon dioxide and giving off oxygen. Okay, so the third approach here, or organization here, is more of a local approach other than a global approach. So this is not between countries, but it's within countries. And this is the Juma Sustainable Forest Reserve, the SFR. So this is actually a RED project that protects a large area of the rainforest in the Amazon. So this is specifically and local to the Amazon. So local people are paid £28 not to cut down trees. The money comes from donations from sources like the Marriott hotels, the Bradesco Bank, which is a Latin American bank, but that is now based in the US. And they have had several successes. And one is that a large area of the Amazon forest is protected. And also, this particular project here is creating or generating income for the locals. And is also educating those locals on sustainable farming. Now, if they're educated on sustainable farming, obviously, their farming practices will ensure that they are not harming the rainforest in the Amazon. Then we have limitations here. And the limitation, one of them is that $28 is not much money. And also that this organization here is relying on donations. And if those donations obviously were to stop, then they would not be able to function or to operate. Then the other limitation is that it stunts development locally, as there is no access to local resources. Now, that means that because you are restricting the locals from accessing the natural resources that are in the Amazon, then you are restricting development in those communities. Then the last limitation is illegal logging, and that's the one we had talked about earlier, where obviously you have this organization SFR, but they cannot stop all the logging that is taking place. There are still some people or some organizations that, no, not just some organizations, but mostly people that will manage to do illegal logging. What is sustainable forest management? Now, sustainability means meeting our needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So what that means is that we are using our resources, or the resources that are available, in a way that does not deplete them, such that future generations do not have resources that they can use to meet their needs in the future. So sustainable forest management considers the economic, social, and environmental aspects of conservation. So it takes, or it has, a holistic approach. Okay, and the Kilam Ijim Forest project in Cameroon seeks to do just that. It's a sustainable forest reserve that was established in 1987 by the BirdLife International or by BirdLife International. So here are some of the strategies that they are using. And these strategies are quite important to remember because you may be asked about them in the examination. And the first strategy they use is agroforestry. So agroforestry is a form of sustainable farming. And this is where crops are grown between the trees. Now this ensures, that's agroforestry right here, so that ensures that the trees are not cut down. And obviously it maintains the forest ecosystem. Okay. Then we have ecotourism as well. So this is obviously a type of tourism that has a low carbon footprint, and it will also benefit the locals economically because they will get jobs and therefore will be able to make an income and improve their quality of life, and this can also lead to the multiply effect. So that's another strategy that is being used by this project. Then the third one is apiculture, or apiculture if you like. So apiculture is beekeeping, and this helps to sustain the local livelihood economy. Right now, I think this is also important, not just for supporting the locals. Obviously, the locals are getting the honey from the bees, and they are selling that bees, and they are obviously making money from that. But the bees are also very important because they help the trees and the yes, the trees that are in the and the plants that are in the that are in the forest, because we know that the bees do a very important job of moving nectar around. So the bees are also really, really important for the ecosystem here. Then we have afforestation, and this is when new trees are planted to replace the ones that have been cut down. So this replenishing of the rainforest is really important. Then we also have an extractive reserve. So growing of commercial crops like rubber and nuts. So this ensures that ground cover and it ensures ground cover so that the soil does not get eroded by wind or water, and then also ensures an income for the locals. So an extractive reserve is basically where you're growing commercial crops, so like rubber trees. Now that will also help maintain the forests. Then lastly, the last strategy here is providing tree cover in watersheds. So this provides shade for the water to reduce rapid evaporation. And it also reduces flood risk and improves water quality. So you've got the trees that you have planted. They are obviously providing shade. That is reducing rapid evaporation, so is maintaining the soil moisture, and the trees are also intercepting the raindrops. So because of that interception, they are delaying runoff and also increasing the lag time, which obviously is reducing on the flood risk. And the trees also tend to purify the water, and that obviously is also improving the water quality in the area. Now, what challenges has this project here in Cameroon faced? So again, one of the main challenges here is climate change. Then you also have a growing population. Now, as the population grows, obviously, there will be need for some of the trees in this forest to be cut down to make way for people's homes. And then apart from that, it's also going to be cut down for fuel wood, so firewood, and also for urbanization. So if the population here obviously is growing, we will need space for housing to be built, and that housing is likely to be built in these areas where the rainforest is going to be cleared for that housing to be put up. Then the project here relies on donations, and therefore if there are no donations, then they will find it difficult to operate. What is being done to conserve the taiga? So the taiga covers such a vast area that it's referred to as a wilderness. Now, most of it is in Canada, Russia, and Scandinavia. And in the taiga, illegal logging and deforestation are not a major problem. And this is because there are no major poverty issues like we have in the areas where the rainforests are found. As we said previously, the taiga is found in countries that are mostly HIC. So the main concern here is actually logging. So logging is normally done by for commercial purposes and is done by TNCs or transnational corporations. So that is one of the main concerns, and the other one is hydroelectric power stations and mining for oil and gas. Okay, so the threats here are slightly the direct threats here are slightly different to the ones that you have in the tropical rainforest. So the conservation strategies covered in the Edexcel B specification are summarized below. And the first one here, the first strategy is national parks. So many areas in the taiga are designated as national parks in the USA, Canada, and Russia. They are large areas that are open to the public but are protected from exploitation of resources. Okay, so they are only available to the public and open to the public, and these large TNCs that would like to do logging or other activities such as mining and construction of hydroelectric power are not allowed to do that there. And an example is Wood Buffalo National Park in Canada. It was created in 1922 to protect the mountain bison from hunters. And due to the rarity of the bison, it became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1982 and a Ramsar wetland in 1982 as well. Now, what are the threats then to these national parks? So again, global warming is a threat. And we also have the Athabasca tar sands mining. That is also a threat, because despite the fact that it's not necessarily being done in the national park or the national parks, the impact of it in terms of water pollution and air pollution is likely to be felt, and the decrease obviously in the biodiversity in those other areas, the impact of that is likely to be felt in the national parks as well. But we'll be talking about the Athabasca tar sands mining a little later on. And then obviously the last threat here is hydroelectric power dams. So the second organization here, or strategy rather, is the USA Wilderness Act of 1964. Now these two here, the national parks and the USA Wilderness Act of 1964, are very important ones to remember for the exam. So this is an act created, this act created areas of wilderness, right? So it aimed to protect isolated places with little settlement. And they are government-owned areas where mining and building of infrastructure is not allowed. Now, camping in these areas here of wilderness is allowed, but visitors must maintain a low carbon footprint. So this here, this act protects those areas that are isolated from destruction by these TNCs. Who are the stakeholders in the taiga and how do their views differ? Now, because the paper 3 is a decision-making examination, these stakeholders and their views will be important for us. So a stakeholder is a person, a group of people or organization that is affected by or involved in a particular issue or place. So the different opinions can cause conflict or disagreement. And the table below shows some of the stakeholders in the taiga and their points of view. So I have classed this, or divided these into those in favor of exploiting taiga's resources and those who are against exploiting taiga's resources. So the ones in favor of exploitation of the taiga are businesses. That the first category is businesses. So these include oil companies that exploit the tar sands that we had talked about earlier, and logging companies. So the taiga is a source of income for them, and they would therefore like to continue to exploit it so that they can continue to make that money. Now, please do remember that these are large TNCs, and therefore they destroy very large tracts of the taiga biome. Then the other stakeholder here that is in favor of exploitation is the local government. Now, exploited resources can be sold locally and internationally, and they can boost the national GDP of that particular country, and therefore the local governments are going to be in favor of exploitation of the taiga. Now, some exploitation such as HEP is renewable and crucial for development, because for you to develop you will need energy, and therefore that's one argument that the local governments use, that HEP, for example, hydroelectric power, is renewable, so it's a good way of producing electricity and is needed for the development. Then we have residents as well. Some of the residents are in favor of the exploitation of the taiga's resources, and these are especially the ones who have benefited from jobs in those very remote areas, and those jobs obviously are helping them to earn some money and to improve their quality of life or standard of living. So what groups then are against the exploitation of the of taiga's resources? So we have the environmentalists here, and these ones include conservation groups such as the World Wildlife Federation, the WWF, and their argument is that the taiga is one of the last untouched biomes with a biodiversity that needs to be preserved and protected. Okay, so the environmentalists are not for the idea of exploiting the taiga. Then another group is residents as well. A group of residents rather here believe that the taiga should not be exploited, and that's because it's culturally important to them, and that it's their right to preserve their land and their heritage for their future generations. And this, you would imagine, would be the indigenous tribes or the indigenous people that have lived there for generations. They would like the taiga to be preserved, and they don't like the fact that there are organizations that are coming to interfere with their home. Then we have scientists as well. Now, they believe that trees are important carbon sinks, like we said earlier about the trees improving the air quality, and that they maintain a balance in the atmospheric gases and prevent global warming, and therefore the taiga biome needs to be protected. That brings us to the end of Forests Under Threat, the second topic for paper 3. I hope that you have found this summary useful. I will be posting the third topic shortly, so look out for it. All the best for now, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye-bye for now.